What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. And today, I'm gonna be reacting to a video about women debating whether they should stick to traditional roles or take on the more modern approach. To see how this discussion goes down, let's get into the mess. And as always, the link to the full video will be in the description.
To start us off today, our first prompt is, I agree with traditional gender roles.
So for me, yes, I am someone that does believe in traditional gender roles. However, I don't feel like everything has to be set in stone. But however, do I believe that a man should be the provider? Absolutely. That's something that I know that works for me. And I believe we all have choice power. So having children eventually one day, I want to be able to have the option of maybe not working and that being okay.
Thank you.
While I agree that the role of being a provider comes naturally to men, I do find it interesting that women want to have options regarding the roles they take on. But for men, not so much. To be fair to her though, she does say that this is something she wants for herself and alludes to the fact that neither men or women have to stick to their traditional roles.
You know, we're two genders. But I think in the past, that demarcation line between people fulfilling roles, I think that's gotten blurred. And it's been to our advantage as women, because by having that very strong delineation between this is what a man does and this is what a woman does, we have surrendered a lot of power as women.
She's right in that over the years, the lines have become blurred because of how society's changed. But sometimes, it seems as though while women have had more options opened up to them, the role that men are expected to play has pretty much stayed the same. With women now able to earn and make their own way in the world, the dynamics and expectations of men and women has become unclear. A prime example of this can be seen in all the discussions and videos that people make about women going 50-50 on a first date. And actually, now that I think about it, this is another one of those traditional roles that's expected of men that most women feel they should be obligated to take on.
So I think it's important that we take that power back. If that means that we have to function in the world taking on somewhat of a man's role, then we do it, and we have done it. And I think by doing that, we have empowered ourselves, and because of that, we are better role models for our daughters and for young women.
So what do you mean when you say power?
Power is, in other words, we're not subservient. We, have our own earning power, we have our place in the world, we're making a contribution, we're not just being the nurturing person that sits at home raising children, we're doing much more than that.
Options and equality. That's power. I was interested to hear you talk about going back to traditional roles. I don't know which tradition you want to go back to, but I come from the women's movement from the 70s, and of course that's almost the second iteration. The women's movement started in 1848, and we're talking about a period of time where women's lives were totally, you couldn't inherit the money. You meant that if you didn't get married, you were an old maid, and there weren't any other options.
By women stepping into the man's role, it's given them the ability to contribute financially, but it hasn't come without its trade-offs. And even though a lot of women have found satisfaction in their careers, there are also a lot of women who've become more stressed out and miserable because of it. When the First Lady said that women aren't just nurturers who sit at home raising children, it seemed to me like she was undermining how important that job is and how much pleasure a lot of women get out of it. If a woman wants to go out and build a career, that's fine. But a woman who chooses to look after the home shouldn't be looked at as someone who's less than.
So when you go back to tradition, I don't know how far back you're going, but I do know that if we keep the roles the way that they had been in the past, there's been a lot of abuse for women. Mm-hmm. The women from the 1970s, they looked very militant. And I understand that young women of today find those kinds of feminists off-putting because they feel that they have somehow buried what they feel is their gentler nature. There's a kind of rebellion about it now, and I respect that and I understand where it's coming from. But we, as the old feminist, the old women's movement, set the stage so that you now have the choices. And when you say you want to go back to traditional roles, I don't think you mean to go back to the time when women had no choices.
Unfortunately, when it comes to the rate of abuse that women went through in the 1950s, there's hardly any data to look at because of how things were at the time. If I had to guess though, I'd say it was probably pretty high because no one talked about it. And from what I understand, the police didn't really deal with any complaints they might get. When people talk about men and women taking on their traditional roles, what they're mostly talking about is men and women doing the jobs that come naturally to them. It doesn't mean we have to go back to how the laws were back in the day, but with men and women playing their role in the home, maybe the chaotic nature we see in relationships wouldn't be so rampant. Now, if society really wants to make it so men and women are practically the same in every capacity, it'll require us to operate in a way that we've never done before, which isn't something that our nature will let us do so easily. And because of that, I expect that we'll be in murky waters for quite a while when it comes to the dynamics of relationships between men and women.
So Aisha, what do you mean by going back to traditional gender roles?
Certainly, I am not a fan of having zero options, zero choices. Do I think that women should not vote and we should go back? No, I do not support that in any capacity. I support women having, equal rights to pay. I'm for gender equality in terms of women, making as much money as men do. Everyone's household is different. Not everyone even has a man to even rely on. And so, yeah, I think that it's fair to say, yeah, you should be making whatever money you're qualified to be making. So when I speak about traditional gender roles, I'm talking about the knowing of who's playing what role specifically. There's always a masculine and feminine energy, and I would prefer for my man to have that masculine energy. For me, as to where it stands, it solely means a man being a provider and being okay with that. I also am in an interesting space myself because I'm very feminine, but I also do work. And so what does that look like? How do I strike the balance? I know that for me, I don't want someone to tell me necessarily, no, you cannot work at all under no circumstances, but I want options.
From what I understand, relationships need polarity between the man and woman. There's the masculine energy that usually means providing, protecting, and leading, and feminine energy, which is nurturing and supporting. Now, if the guy wants to take on the feminine role and the girl wants to take on the masculine role, they can do that. And in fact, there are a lot of relationships that work exactly like this. When she talked about how every household is different, she's right. And the fact is, most families can't survive these days with only one parent working, so the man being the sole provider is already a thing of the past.
Do you think that there are some women who might feel that the oppression in their eyes was protection from things that they did not want to be involved with, and that perhaps by opening that door has forced them to do things that they now have to do?
I think by not wanting to be standing up for yourself, you're basically taking on a child's role. And what you're saying is you take care of me, you provide, you do what I need to do, when everyone's fully capable of taking care of themselves. And by not doing that, you relinquish, again, back to the word power. Power is not only income. Power is standing up for yourself, doing what you feel is right, making your own choices. We're fully capable as women to do the same types of jobs, to do a lot of the things that men do. It's just a question of reprogramming our minds and knowing that we have the ability to do something.
For the most part, when asked, women still want their man to step into the provider and protector role, which makes sense as it's become a part of their nature due to our evolutionary history. And while women can technically do most of the jobs that men do, the reality is they don't want to do them. While this is something that can change over time, it's not going to happen overnight. Our evolutionary psychology plays a big role as to why men and women do the things they do. And this is something that developed over thousands of years, so we can't just flip a switch or reprogram our minds as she suggested. Not only are men and women psychologically different, our biology is different too, so we have different strengths and weaknesses.
My view of feminism is a little different. It includes men. I want equality. I don't want equality for the women here. I want equality for us.
When you say us, you're talking about men and women?
Everyone.
Everyone.
Everyone, of course. I have grandsons. I have granddaughters. I want their life to be one where they know they're going into that job and they may or may not get it because of their qualifications. If we had time for a conversation, I would have a long conversation with you about, as my friend mentioned, if you really wanted to live in those time periods. Oh my goodness. It would be destructive. My sense of what you said. The man in your life doesn't have the options that you want. He gets to be the provider. He gets to be the male and have the male energy, and that's his job. You, on the other hand, get to be feminine and have all the choices to work or to not work or to be or to not be. I hope that he gets to be masculine and he gets to be in charge and he gets to be a forceful human being in whatever his view or her view is of masculinity, and that she gets to wear the high heels and be as feminine as she wishes. And it doesn't mean that either one of them don't know how to use a hammer. And it doesn't mean that either one of them doesn't change the diaper, because they want to. That's who they are as people. And that's the merging I want to see for my kid.
I like the way she thinks, because it sounds like she's in full support of people being able to get jobs that they're qualified to do, not just because of their race or gender. She also addressed the issue I brought up earlier about the man's role not really being interchangeable, because he'd always be expected to provide and protect. But the role a woman plays is fluid, and she can choose to do or not do something. This sort of discrepancy can make men who feel like their role is undervalued frustrated, because no matter what, it's obligatory.
So that brings me to my next point. Women should prioritize family over career.
I think that women have done that in the past, and they found themselves lost for their own, they had no self-identity. As a consequence, they, went through a lot of depression and felt very unfulfilled. And I think this thing about, men and women gender roles, it's like we're all human beings and we all have gifts and we all have talents, and it's up to us to figure out what and how we want to contribute them to the world. And so by doing that, we find our place in the world.
Back in the day, and even now, women who prioritize their family find a deep sense of purpose from their role as a caregiver. Alongside this, though, people are also starting to equate self-worth to someone's professional achievements, which can make stay-at-home moms feel like they haven't accomplished anything. Because of this narrative, a lot of women have delayed having a family so they can build up their careers, but some end up leaving it too late and end up not having a family at all. Whenever I heard stories like this, it reminds me of a quote I heard in a film I watched years ago, but for the life of me, I can't remember what the movie's called. Anyway, it was about a woman who kind of pushed everyone away so she could find her dream job and make the kind of money she wanted. But when she got there in the end, she said, "I'm standing in the middle of everything, surrounded by nothing." And basically, what she meant was, even though she had everything she wanted, she had no one to share it with, so it was meaningless.
So do you think women are more prone to being better nurturers to children?
I think men can also nurture children as well. There are plenty of single fathers. In fact, when you mentioned earlier about, a man with a hammer or a woman with a hammer, I think, we all have the ability to do multi-things.
So you don't think that some of that is more nature versus nurture in terms of a woman's ability?
If it's inherent?
Correct.
I think that it is part of women's nature. However, men can learn it too. And that's what feminism has taught men.
While men and women can take on different roles and jobs whenever a situation calls for it, at the end of the day, men and women have their own strengths and weaknesses. Even when it comes to looking after my own kid, me and my wife do things very differently. And while she's usually the one doing the comforting, feeding, and bathing, I'm always the one trying to get them to learn stuff so they can become more independent.
I know you talked about women and their need for fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that being a mother is fulfilling?
I think being an attorney is fulfilling, being a doctor is fulfilling, being, a mother could be fulfilling for somebody, being whatever, whatever you label yourself as is fulfilling.
This sense of fulfillment thing was probably the silliest thing I heard in this discussion. Even when she listed off the jobs that are fulfilling, she talked about high status and high earning careers. But what about all the women who are working minimum wage or in unfavorable conditions? Most people don't love their job or find any real purpose in it and are only working because they have bills to pay. Unless you've landed your dream job, going out to work and slaving away for a big company isn't a gift. The company couldn't give two shits about you. I know women who were making a lot of money, but when they finally had kids and started a family, going back to work was the last thing they wanted to do. Of course, this isn't going to be the case for every woman, but there are a lot of women who feel this way.
Not every woman necessarily wants a child.
Right.
And I know in my own circle of 4 women who are young and are making the decision that that is not for them, and it's happening more and more. But I really think that somewhere children's rights should be considered. So it takes 2 to make a child, and there should be a commitment about bringing that child, and it should come from both of them. And there is probably a biological part where, since a woman carries the child, she's probably more attached to the child when they're born. But after 2 or 3 years, sometimes it's the father that's the, and I know situations like that, they've stepped into the parenting role and the mother has moved back. So that's because it's fluid today. I mean, in my generation, that would probably have been unheard of. But since we're giving people these choices, I think that it's very difficult to generalize like that. And every individual, including men, have a right. And I think to assign men the provider role is to put a yoke on them. It's a lot of responsibility. And I know men who've held down jobs that they're miserable in because they're supporting a mortgage and a wife and 2 children. And that also is as unfair as keeping a woman home without having any kind of expression about who she is.
What she said at the end about assigning men with the provider role isn't something that was placed on us by society, at least not entirely. It's what humans needed if we wanted to survive before we had all the amazing technology we have today. A woman wanting a man who can provide and protect her isn't really a conscious decision. It's just a part of their hardwiring, as are some of the traits that men look for in women. A lot of men find their purpose in being able to provide for their family, which is why things become chaotic when that role is taken away from them. We already know that most people aren't all that excited about their job, but if a man goes out, works hard, and comes home to a place where he feels valued and appreciated, it'll make his days a lot easier to get through.
In this world and what we see today, do you believe that women should prioritize their family over their careers?
I can't say should, because that's their journey to walk. I don't think that it's women or men. I do believe that women have more of a nurturing spirit. I want to operate in my strengths, right? And I believe that a man most likely wants to operate in his strengths. But then you have circumstance. Then you have lifing. So even with the gender roles, you have certain strengths to fill those roles, and I have certain strengths to fill other roles, but they're going to swap, they're going to intertwine, they're going to go up and down and all around. So I can't say what they should do, but I think it's more so the unit, what works for you guys, and ultimately what is going to fulfill you in the end.
We know that not every woman wants to have children, but I don't think they should be so quick to make the decision to put off having a family. Yes, women can freeze their eggs and all that, but IVF isn't always as easy as people make it seem. It would also work out much better for women if hypergamy wasn't a thing, because it would mean they could choose from a pool of men that isn't limited to guys who make the same or more money than they do. It'd be much easier for high-earning women if they could be happy with the man who'd want to stay home with the kids.
So I'll go. I'm Maggie, and I'll be 50 next year. I do believe that we can have it all, but not at the same time. But I think what is important is that we are not equal. We are equally valued, but I think we are very different. And I think what can be confused is that we have a natural biology that we are born with. And I agree with choice. I also have advanced degrees, I've been an executive and all of that, but my proudest moments are having been a wife and mother. And for me, I want a masculine man. I have a masculine man. And what I tell the young women that I teach is that a masculine man requires a feminine woman. he is not going to compete with you. And that's the mistake that I made that cost me my first marriage, thinking that my big job, thinking that all of my accomplishments mattered in my relationship. They do not. What helps you in the corporate world can absolutely hurt you in the relationship that you want. So what I tell ladies is that you have to choose. Unless you can code switch and do both at the same time, it's very difficult, but you're going to have to choose. And the last thing that I would say is I don't think that we have all the time that we want if family is a priority because of that biology. I was married at 25, and we were able to have the kids in my 30s, but I had the relationship set. What I see a lot of young women doing is prioritizing career and then having that oh no moment, and they're scrambling. So I say absolutely work with your husband and find out what's best for your family, but go ahead and get that relationship settled out of the way. It's going to be so much harder for you for the kind of man that I think most women want.
She was absolutely cooking, and honestly, I don't have anything to add to what she had to say. But guys, if you want to see the rest of this debate, check out the link below. And if you enjoyed this video, let YouTube know by hitting that subscribe button and dropping a comment, and I'll see you down there.